What is up, guys? I'm coming back here with another video, and today I'm going to go over 4 concepts in Python that are a bit confusing, and many of the people I tutor find them to be confusing. So the first topic is class instantiation, which an example of that is right here when we build and fit the model. So basically, to explain, a class can be thought, you can think of a class as a person. And then the functions are all the things a person can do, like running, kicking, jumping, punching. And before a human, a person can kick, punch, jump, run, walk, do anything. It has to be born first. So you're instantiating the class. And then once it's instantiated, once it exists, then it can, once the person exists, then they can punch and kick. Well, maybe not as a baby, but I think you get the point. So that is why those parentheses are there. Sometimes you have to pass in arguments, like right here. Sometimes you have to pass in arguments into instantiating a class. Usually you don't. For decision tree regressor class, you don't have to. So I'm gonna show you really quick what happens if you do not pass parentheses, if you do not have the parentheses, because you need to have the parentheses. So if you don't have the parentheses, you get fit missing one required positional argument. So basically, the decision tree regressor, the fit, actually the fit function from the decision tree regressor class actually takes in 3 arguments, not 2. It takes in self, it takes in x, and it takes in y. When we have the parentheses, it ensures that self is automatically, which is the class of decision tree regressor, which is self, is automatically passed into the fit function. But when we don't have those parentheses instantiating it, self needs to be passed in here instead. So now, and because position matters, so now it thinks that x is self, it thinks that y is x, and it doesn't know where y is. So that is why it got that error. So we can bring this back, and it obviously will fix our problem. And then also times you may notice you see a model.fit in some of these Jupyter notebooks. And what happens is the model is alias. So they'll take this decision tree regressor as what the model actually is, and then they'll just assign it to the name of model. So now it's just, now we can type model every time we use decision tree regressor, because a lot of times the reason why people do that is because that is what the model is. So when you're calling the model, that's when you're using the model and you're fitting the model and you're storing the model, that's actually what you're doing. It was, you know what I'm saying? In other words, instead of model.fit, model.score, model.evaluate, it's decision tree regressor with the parentheses .fit, .score, .evaluate, etc. Okay, moving on to the next one. You call functions from classes, and this is more going into what we were just talking about, but essentially decision tree regressor is the class, and then fit is a function or method. Method and function are interchangeable. That can be done. And then you have a fitted model. So then that's another object, and then you could score it again with another method, the scoring method. Another example, I guess that's the example I have in this code. And now you have methods versus attributes. So sometimes you just have it like where it's like something dot something. What I'm talking about is like right here, df dot shape. You just have shape. and sometimes objects. In an object, it can be a function, it can be a class, a number, a string. It can be basically everything in Python is an object. And some objects, they have description, they can be described in certain ways. They have these attributes where there's essentially just very basic information about a certain object that gets stored. So for example, how many rows and columns in a data frame is automatically stored. So rather than having a function that returns the number of rows and the number of columns, you can just call it really quickly with the dot shape. And df dot shape is a tuple, as you can see, which is when you have two numbers in parentheses. It's a pair of numbers essentially. When you have the parentheses, you're calling it as if it's a function where you have, like function name, parentheses, the arguments that you pass in. So now it won't work because only functions and classes are callable. Tuples are not callable. So that is why that would result in such an error. And then you also have, this is a method, the correlation. Correlation can actually is actually an attribute and a method, but for the purposes of this video, it is a method. And that method returns this correlation grid that basically it quantifies how strongly any combination of features are with each other, like age versus zone. I actually entirely don't remember all of what these columns actually are, but tax versus age, how's the correlation doing there? And the last topic is arguments versus keyword arguments. So I'm sure you notice you'll have sometimes, and I'm typing this in this bottom cell here, sometimes you'll have it where it's like arg, or let's say func. You have like a function and it takes in args, like it takes in like argument 1, argument 2, and then it has like this weird equal sign where it goes like arg3 equals like a number, or sometimes like a string or something. And when you have a argument that's like equal to something, that means that it's a keyword argument, which in keyword arguments, they always go after these types of arguments, which are positional arguments. So they always go after the positional arguments, and you don't have to pass them because they already have default values that they're set to. So you only need to pass a keyword argument if you want to change the value of that particular argument from the default. An example, let's say maybe you have like logistic regression, I remember by default has 100 iterations, which means like it basically improves itself. It goes through gradient descent optimization method 100 times. But if you know you have a really big data set and you want to do more, you can set that to a higher number, like 10,000 or 100,000 or something. So the keyword arguments are optional and you don't have to pass them. There are some times though, if you don't pass a certain keyword argument, you will get an error though. Like if we do right here, where we have df drop, and then we have the axis columns, axis equals to columns. If we get rid of that, we get an error. And the reason is because we're selecting the price column from the data frame, but we're selecting this based on the axis, and there is no price column that is found in the axis. So we have to set the axis equals to columns. And now the axis is the list of all the column names, price being one of them, so now it works. So sometimes that specific keyword value has to be applied for the other things to work together, for the other arguments you're passing in to work together properly. So that explains anyway why sometimes you have things that are just like an argument by themselves, and sometimes they're equal to a certain value. Anyway, that's been the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.